All right. Well, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you get notifications when I drop the latest video. No, not really. I've just always wanted to say that after years of watching YouTube videos. But, I mean, if you want to, you can. But, no, I'm really sorry. I just wanted to say that. I had to get that out of my system. Okay, we're good to go. All right, well, we're back with another episode of Remote Instruction. And so last time we talked about the American politics from roughly 1824 through 1840. Today we're going to look at the second party system. Now remember, we said the second party system's created in 1834 when the Whig Party comes into creation. And it is between the Jacksonian Democrats and the Whig Party. Now, what we're going to look at today is how each political party in the second party system, what they thought of people, what they thought of government, and what they thought about society. Now, remember, political rhetoric is very important. Politics really meant something to people in the 19th century. Rhetoric was very important in the 19th century. And so Whigs and Jacksonian Democrats had very differing worldviews that informed their understanding of the era's major political issues. And these are very, very national parties. And people decided on which party to be a part of based on what they believed. So here are basically what Jacksonian Democrats thought about man. Jacksonian Democrats had a great faith in isolated men. They believed that they were outsiders, misfits, or victims of society. In other words, what that means, if they believed if they didn't succeed at something, it's not their fault. Others were to blame. They blamed selfish, power-hungry people of always getting in the way of the little guy. If they did succeed, however, they did so against great odds, and they won this great big victory that's just completely unimaginable. They believed that there was threatening forces outside, like corporations that wanted to harm people. They attacked corporations for their impersonality and lack of human understanding or compassion. And Democrats really claimed to care about people. They also believed that men needed to be left alone from any outside forces. They thought man's best when left alone. They thought that men were in control of their own lives, and they thought that their lives should not be dictated by other people or outside forces. So because of that, they're against artificial systems. A lot of them opposed large church groups. They opposed clubs, organizations, social groups, things like that. They opposed formal education. They wanted people to be independent. Now, Whigs, on the other hand, considered themselves insiders. They did not feel like an outside force was coming in and trying to take over them. They thought people naturally had potential. And they thought that people had unlimited potential throughout the world, both good and bad potential. They also believed that the greatest threat to an individual's position in society was not the actions of others, but the tyranny of his own inner drives. They thought groups could help make people better. So they thought artificial institutions were necessary for the advancement of society. They supported institutions that helped men achieve self-mastery. They saw humanitarian reforms as a way to instill order and discipline. And they thought, working together with other people was going to be the best. All right, now let's look at how Jacksonians viewed government. Well, for one, Jacksonians thought that government was a threat to man. They thought the government should do as little as possible. They wanted people to always be left alone. They believed local politics were more important than national politics. Most Jacksonians had a very strict construction to the Constitution, much like Thomas Jefferson. And they don't believe in the public good. In other words, they don't think that everybody can benefit from certain things. They don't want expanded power. They want to focus on state and city politics. They wanted to bring the government to the people. And they wanted just to be left alone, primarily. They don't want the government telling them what to do. All right. Whigs, on the other hand, saw government as having positive uses. They thought that the government could help create laws that could facilitate, organize, and lead to order in society. They thought government helps people achieve more. And they thought that an active government actually promoted freedom and equality. So they thought government was necessary. All right, so two very polar opposite views of government. All right, so now let's look at what each political party feared. The Democrats feared an industrial society. They feared losing freedom, and they feared big government. So Jacksonians were very much like Thomas Jefferson. They wanted an agricultural society, right? They wanted to support being a farming nation. They didn't really want industrialization. And they thought that government would get too big and that the bank would get too powerful. So when you say big government, Jacksonian Democrats fear the Bank of the United States. That's why Andrew Jackson vetoes it when Henry Clay tries to renew the charter early. Whigs have a lot of fears. Whigs feared that the United States would become dependent on other countries. Whigs feared that the Jacksonian Democrats would destroy the Bank of the United States. And once the Bank of the United States was destroyed, they feared that the country would not move ahead. They thought people wouldn't move to cities. They don't want people living in just an agricultural way of life. They want people in cities working in industry. And they thought that Democrats were going to destroy the institutions that they thought were very important. And most of all, Whigs feared Democrats. All right, so those are the things that they feared, things that they supported, and just the things that they wanted to see. So like if we look at specific issues, for the bank, for instance, Democrats did not like the banks. They didn't really understand them, and so they wanted to destroy them. They thought that banks were just bastions of corruption and privilege for a select few. Whigs saw the bank as important and essential to both the state and the nation. Whigs saw banks as being an engine to economic progress that led to enhanced possibilities. Tariffs. Democrats don't want tariffs. They don't want to be an industrial society, so they don't want strong protective tariffs. Whigs, on the other hand, do want protective tariffs because they thought everybody benefited from protective tariffs. Okay, internal improvements. When you talk about like transportation improvements, the building of roads, bridges, and canals, things like that. Democrats don't support the federal government or any government paying for those improvements. They thought people shouldn't have to pay for it if they're not going to use it. Why should somebody pay for a road in Kentucky if you don't live in Kentucky and you're never going to drive on that road? Whigs, on the other hand, said, yeah, government should contribute to building a great system. They thought that everybody could benefit from it. All right, so those are just a few little issues of the second party system and what each political party thought about it. All right, now before we end, we need to talk about the road not taken with the second party system. It's important to understand that the second party system, the thing that they focused on was economics. The second party system was not really interested in slavery at all. What the second party system cared about was about economics, banks, internal improvements, transportation, market revolution, things like that. Now, the road not taken is slavery. The second party system very rarely talked about slavery, even though slavery was rampant and growing during this period. So the one issue that does come up during the second party system deals with the nullification crisis of 1832. Now, what this is it had to do with the Tariff of 1828, or the Tariff of Abominations. Southerners did not like this tariff, and they did not like the tariff because they thought it was going to harm the cotton industry and harm the income they could make. So a very famous South Carolinian politician named John C. Calhoun, you can see his picture here, said, if the federal government passes a law that you don't think is fair as a state, the states have the right to nullify it. In other words, the state have the right to say that national federal law is not valid. Now, what this does, they argue, Southerners and John C. Calhoun's arguing this based off of states' rights. But what happens when Calhoun does try to nullify the Tariff of 1828 or the Tariff of Abominations? President Jackson says, No. Big resounding no. He says, you can't do that. Andrew Jackson threatens to send an army down there. He even threatens that he is going to hang John C. Calhoun from the nearest tree he can find. And so what ends up happening is Henry Clay steps in and he offers a compromise tariff of 1833. So South Carolina won't feel so bad. It kind of lowers. It's in the middle of the road. And so it ends up kind of saving and ending the thing. Jackson also, during the whole crisis, when South Carolina is threatening to nullify this law and this tariff, authorizes something called the Force Bill. And basically what that is the Force Bill allows the president to crush nullification. Now, the big thing with it is slavery is the main thrust behind this whole nullification crisis. And Jackson made it very clear that he was not going to let slavery divide the country. Jackson believed that the country needed to be unified and that he was willing to make and take steps that would help the country remain whole. All right, so this brings us now to another big question. How could you tell in what led people to be a Whig and what led people to be a Jacksonian Democrat? Well, oftentimes, Jacksonian Democrats said that wealthy people were Whigs, and Whigs said that poorer people or farmers were Jacksonian Democrats. But this isn't really true. You often have very, very wealthy banking, wealthy big business people who are Jacksonian Democrats, and you also have some very poor farmers who are Whigs. Education is also not a good indicator. Very few people during this period actually went to college. Keep in mind, Abraham Lincoln during this period is a Whig, and he only had about a year worth of school, so education is not an indicator. Schools during this period are also not required. Region is not a good indicator. There were Jacksonian Democrats both in the North and in the South. Ethnicity. Typically, Irish voted Democrat when they settled in the cities, but they're really the only large ethnic voting bloc. So the best indicator of if you would have been a Whig or a Jacksonian Democrat was religion. Evangelicals, your Protestant evangelicals, tended to vote Whig, whereas Catholics tended to vote Democratic. It's rather a very strange indicator. It doesn't make much sense, but that actually is the best indicator. The second best indicator is how your parents voted. If your parents voted for the Whig Party, odds were you were going to be a Whig as well. All right, excellent. I'll catch you next time when we dive further and talk about the reform movements of the 19th century. So, see you later. Have a fantastic rest of your day, morning, evening, whenever you are watching this video. See you later.